Hi, everybody. This is Damien from Legend Life. With our Fit Life After 40 talks, we look to share with you tips, advice, and strategies to help optimize your performance and training and become the best athlete you can possibly be after 40. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Julie Young. Julie is an ex-professional racer, bike racer, and also a member of the US track team. No, not track team, but the road cycling team. She's got over 12 years of experience. She's also a sports scientist and has her own business where she coaches and trains endurance athletes. So how are you today, Julie?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. So to get started, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background about yourself, and then, how did you, in the younger years, were you also involved in sports?
Yeah, I don't know how far back you want me to go, but always been like a very driven kid and always drawn to sport, like always pursuing, whether it was little league or swim team or alpine ski racing or soccer. So, my parents were super supportive, but just kind of along for the ride, not push me at all. And just kind of looking back, I realized, like, gosh, I was a painfully shy kid, and it was just sport became my voice and my expression. So, just super drawn to it. It's always been a part of my life. And, and then I was an alpine ski racer primarily and a soccer player, and I had an ACL injury as a sophomore in high school, and then had to kind of rethink what I was doing. I was planning on going to college and having a soccer scholarship, kind of mentally just destroyed when I had that ACL injury, and just mentally had to pick up the pieces and kind of figure out, like, well, what can I do? And I was super determined to play a sport in college. So I was like, hey, bad knee, I can play golf. So started playing golf as a sophomore, just practicing like from sun up to sundown. And actually was accepted to UCLA. And once I was at UCLA, I tried out for their golf team and made the golf team, and ended up playing a couple of years there. Went to NC2A with an academic All-American, and then just kind of came to a crossroads where the qualifying was getting a little bit questionable in terms of the coach, not necessarily picking those that were qualifying. And I had a decision to make whether I, pursue golf and went to a small liberal arts college in Florida to do that, or finished up at UCLA. And I decided, kind of some soul searching, didn't really love golf. It was more just this thing that I get super determined about something, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. And realized, like, I valued an education at UCLA. So I stayed at UCLA. And when I was there, after I, decided to forfeit my position on the golf team, started doing 10K runs and riding a bike, and just as to have that outlet. Yeah. And then, came home. I had been born and raised in Sacramento, California. I came home and had a job in foreign investment. And one night watching the local news, they did a human interest story on a couple guys, the McKinley brothers, who were from Sacramento, and they raced for the 7-Eleven team, which during a time was like one of the top pro men's team internationally. And the two brothers were like vying for the Olympics for biking. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know there was such a thing as bike racing. So, the very next day I ran down to the bike shop and figured out, how can I start bike racing? And it was just as it ended up, a really good fit for me. And like within a year, I'd been identified by the national team and asked to come to a camp, and then did well there. And basically that launched a 12-year career with U.S. national team and international pro teams.
No, awesome. So what was it about biking that really, became your kind of passion?
I think it's just, I've loved and still love the lifestyle of it. Like I think I'm, again, probably shy and a little bit recluse. So I think, I don't mind being by myself, and you spend a lot of time by yourself when you train. And I actually love it. Like, I love that time to myself and kind of time to my thoughts. And I love the challenge of it. And initially I didn't do great. Like my first race, I remember like it was a crit and I was like literally off the bat within 500 meters, like really humbling experiences in the first couple of races. But that's kind of my mentality is like, it just made me even more motivated to get better. And so just really worked at it. And I'm just, again, a pretty determined person. And it was just something I wanted to get better at. And just kind of evolved with it and found like it was a real natural for me in terms of my athletic abilities and I think, mindset.
No, brilliant. So since your career, I believe you kind of continued with biking. So you certainly have gone on to compete and done quite well. And I believe there's also trail running involved. So maybe you can talk us a little bit about, what you get up to what you're getting up to these days and what kind of keeps, the fire stoked, makes you continue to want to compete.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons. Like again, I love the lifestyle of it. Like it's not necessarily always like I'm not a bucket list type person. Like I don't do things for like that reason, but like honestly, it's just for me what it does for me on a daily basis. And I think having events, like I think it's a great sense of community. It's a great way to see friends, and I think when I do show up for events, like being with others helps me so much better. Like I ride faster, I ride better. On so many levels, I'm so much better when I'm surrounded by my friends and fellow competitors. But it's also just like, I think just on a daily basis, it creates like having that goal of that event creates more balance in my daily life. Like, you get out and you have this nice mix of activity and then sitting down at the desk in front of your computer. And I find for myself, like when I get out, again, it's as much metaphysical as physical for me. It's really time for me to think and mentally regroup. And I just find like my clarity is so much better. My productivity is so much better. And I just feel like I'm better in all aspects of my life.
Okay. So so why would you recommend biking to, others over 40, so a lot of people over 40 now, need some kind of like activity to focus on. Why would you say biking is possibly a good option to try and get involved in?
Well, I just think it's nice for a lot of reasons. I mean, it's obviously a very gentle sport. There's not a lot of impact. I think it's a cool way to adventure. Like, and now there's so many different disciplines. Like, even though I come from a road background, I still do like workouts on my road bike, but I really gravitate towards like gravel riding and mountain biking. So I just love like getting lost in the woods. I love exploring. I love the things I see. And I also think it's a really cool community of people. Like, you go on these long Sunday rides and you're with your friends, and it's such a good way to hang out with your friends and not be distracted by all these other, the technologies of our life these days. That said, I do think it's always good to have a mix. It's always like, if we always bike, we don't get that impact we need. And so just having, some other activities, not be exclusively a cyclist. So some resistance training and, whether the body can tolerate it, maybe some trail running. But I think that mix is super important.
Okay. So, now let's talk a little bit about your personal training, like how you actually train yourself. So what does a week of training look like for you? Because you're still competing, trying to push yourself. So what does a week of training look like for you?
It totally depends on the time of year. And I know people are probably pretty familiar with this idea of phases, but to me, that's like really the beauty and the value of year-round training is you can have different phases through the year. So, where you have different objectives, and it's not variety for the sake of variety. It's really valuable. So just to kind of give you what a year might look like is like coming off summer, where most of my goals and most of the people I train are summer endurance athletes. So coming off that summer, we use fall, what we call like the transition season, as time to dedicate to strength work. And I'm such a believer in strength work, no matter your age. And it's mentally, you pull back. You're not doing that high intensity work anymore. You still have endurance, but maybe comes in different ways. Maybe it's hiking, maybe it's, swimming, maybe it's running, kind of mixing it up, not just, for example, just riding the bike for the endurance, but the real focus becomes that strength work. So good, like 16-week program. And then just as phases work, kind of the idea with phases, as you get kind of then closer to your goal events, they become more specific. So, maybe once we get to the first of the year, then the strength becomes more maintenance. So we do like 1 day of strength and then 1 day of more kind of plyometric work. But then the focus and the energy is more invested on the bike. And, and that you're kind of building that base towards that peak. But for me, like this time of year, and, I've said this, and my formula isn't much different than when I was racing like at the elite international level, but just due to life, and it's a good thing. Like it's the volume's curtailed, and you don't probably need as much, and the recovery is probably need a little bit more recovery. But like for me, like a week would look like Monday is more of a active recovery stability day. So good trunk stability, probably go into the gym, kind of do that maintenance work in the gym. Tuesday would be a speed and power day. So kind of maintaining that quick twitch muscle, and that force development, getting that power into the pedals. So like efforts that are say 10 to 30 seconds. And then Wednesday would be kind of a threshold interval day. And, if Wednesday, let's say Wednesday's more on flat terrain and building towards like an hour at threshold. Like for example, 5 times 10, where you're kind of bouncing from say 4 minutes at sub-threshold to a minute at threshold, back and forth. Thursday would be an endurance day. I really like to do that on dirt, so whether mountain biking or gravel. Friday would be a complete rest day, or maybe I do some like yin yoga, something like that. And Saturday would be an interval session similar to Wednesday, but if I did Wednesday on the flats, I'd do Saturday on climbs. Because I think it's important. I think we can get really comfortable. Like, for example, if we love to climb and all we do is climb, we get super comfortable at that slow cadence. So then when we try to do the higher cadence, we're like, whoa, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of keeping that body, like challenged and not letting it get too comfortable. So, and then Sunday would be another long endurance day.
Yeah, so you factor in one kind of like a rest day per week.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the one thing I think is super duper important, and again, doesn't matter age. Like when I was starting out and I was training myself, like it's all about training hard and resting hard. And I think what happens, especially as we get older, we gravitate to something that feels comfortable. Kind of like this middle junk mileage. Like we're not really challenging ourselves on the intensity side, and then we're not really doing the really important long endurance, slower miles either. And then I think, it's all about like training on those days you train hard, on those days you rest hard. And also I'm a firm believer in like a 3-week build typically. Like sometimes life gets in the way and we have to change that a little bit, but typically a 3-week build. And the first part of that 4th week being dedicated to rest and recovery. So, even though during the year we're taking these dedicated active recovery days and full rest days during the weeks, we're gradually still accruing more stress than rest. Yep. And so I think having those dedicated, that 4th week be more dedicated to rest and recovery, you're kind of putting that back into balance.
No, very good. So now let's talk a little bit about the mix that you're kind of mentioning before, like a lot of endurance people may, or people new to the sport may be going, oh, it should be all time on the bike, or like if you're a runner, more doing the miles, but you're clearly someone who advocates taking on a number of different things that are quite important, like the strength training, the mobility, flexibility work, also working on stability work. So how do you factor that into the actual training?
Yeah, and it's funny, when I think the hardest thing, when I talk to clients, like new clients, and it's just like, because like for good or bad, we're in an age of a ton of information and tons of opinion. And so like you can think to yourself, like as a busy professional, So most people I work with, they're either these U23, which is under 23 mountain bikers, these kids, or busy professionals with families and really finite time. And so I think it can be like overwhelming for that busy professional with families, because you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to do all this stuff. How can I possibly fit it into a week? And then again, just hearing all these opinions. And so, I think it's so I believe like you have to carve out almost as much time off the bike if you're biking or running, whatever the case may be, like for that stability, mobility as you do for that endurance pursuit. So you want your body like functioning at an optimal level, then it's going to function at an optimal level in your sport. Like you want balance, you want the joints loaded properly, that sort of thing. And so, for me, like, again, I would say Monday is dedicated to like that, Monday, let's say Monday is dedicated to just strength, right? So it's you've come off your big strength phase and you're into that maintenance phase. So Monday is like a strength day. Tuesday, like I still run. So like Tuesday, I might run. So I do like hip stability, hip activation, like movement prep, that sort of thing. Wednesday, I would do a trunk stability workout. Thursday, before I ride, I might do some more hip activation. And then like Saturday, trunk stability, and then hip stability before that endurance ride. And it's not tons of time. And the beauty of it is you can do it anywhere, right? You just crawl on the floor and you're good.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's a massive production, like you have to drive to the gym to do it. But, it's more about the consistent doses than just like once a week, I'm going to do an hour. And it's way better. Let's do like 3 times 20 minutes dosed out through the week, or 2 times 30 minutes dosed out through the week. So it doesn't have to be this all or nothing. It's just consistency.
Okay. Well, no, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because it kind of builds on one session builds on the other session. If you kind of keep on doing it, like doing it in big chunk, you kind of give your body too much time to kind of like recover, and you almost go back to where you started, don't you?
Yes.
So what about nutrition? Do you also work with your athletes on nutrition? Is there any kind of like recommendations or plan you have for anyone looking to be an athlete?
I have a master's in sports science and human performance, and we did study nutrition, but I'm not a nutritionist, and I'm a big fan of like getting a team of experts. So for example, if like I have clients that have issues, body issues, I like to have a good PT to send them to. If I have clients that need better nutritional support, I have a good nutritionist I work with. So like I'm a big fan of that. Like I don't want to be all things to all people.
Yep.
But generally for me, I'm a huge fan of this idea. It's a relatively new concept, but just periodizing your nutrition or phasing nutrition with your training. There's different ways people say it, like, fueling for the work required kind of thing, where like, we're not always, it's not just a static, you want this many macronutrients every single day of the week. Those macronutrients should change based on the type of training you're doing. So,
yep.
If you are, like an example, let's say Wednesday's a hard interval day. So Tuesday night, I want to fuel with appropriate carbohydrates. So my body's fueled. Wednesday morning, I want to fuel appropriately. And it's a balance. It's not like all carbohydrates, but you want to make sure you're getting those carbohydrates because you need the glycogen for that higher intensity work. And then, it depends on what your objectives are. But if we want a good recovery, then we want to also have some, big carbohydrate protein after that workout. But then let's say on Thursday, you're going out for long endurance. So maybe Wednesday night, I curtail the carbohydrates, I pull back, and Thursday morning, I pull back on carbohydrates for that ride, because at the end of the day, you want your body using the right kind of fuels for the right kind of intensity. And so if my body is just saturated with carbohydrates, that's easy. The body takes the path of least resistance. So no matter the intensity, it's just going to go, woo, carbohydrates are available. I'm going to take those. I'm not going to work to metabolize the fats. And so it's not about just being metabolically efficient. It's about being metabolically flexible.
Yep.
You want your body. And so people kind of the problem is people are very much all or nothing. So they're like, oh, all fats. And then, then your body doesn't know how to utilize carbohydrates anymore for that high intensity work. And so to me, it's not like an all or nothing, but it's micromanaging the diet around those workouts. So your body is like really efficient, like tapping into the type of fuel it needs.
Okay. So what about the mindset element? So like for an endurance athlete, I guess mindset's very important. How do you push through, when feeling a little bit flat or things are not going well for you during a session, how do you keep the motivation going? So what kind of, work or training do you work with your athletes around that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think generally we really fixate on the physical preparation and we just are neglectful of the mental. And for me in my career, like it was what I have to say I probably loved the most was to realize the power of my mind. Like in really pivotal moments in a race, like it was that thought process that, 5 more pedal strokes and that was the difference. And so I think it's really helping athletes to, you have to keep like, you have to hammer in the message of, the mental side. So again, I think it's really easy to get like fixated on the physical. But I really encourage my athletes to maximize training for the mental as well as the physical conditioning, and of course we all have better days than others. Like, those days where we can really connect the dots and like you go into an interval session and like, for example, I'm coaching kids that are getting ready for US National Mountain Bike race. And it's we know the course exactly. And so like I've created intervals that simulate that course. And I really want those kids mentally putting themselves at that start line to do these intervals, and like everything about not just ticking off the time and not just chasing power on their bike, but really mentally putting themselves in that race. Because that way, like that interval session acts as like a dress rehearsal, and I really help them understand it's like, in training, you're developing the confidence that you can mentally like find another focus for your mind to push through that discomfort. And, you're not fixating on that discomfort. You're finding another focus for your mind, whether that's like the breathing, the posture, the pedal stroke, a mantra. Like all those things can take your mind to another focus other than the discomfort. So to me, like I think generally we just don't maximize training well enough in terms of, utilizing it for the mental and physical conditioning.
Okay. So basically you train them to focus other than the actual activity they're doing. So they kind of like, they're not really focused on like how much they're kind of like working, but they're kind of like focusing on the experience of actually doing the actual activity, as opposed to, I've got to go harder. You're just teaching them to think in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think for good or bad, like people that bike, I don't know if you're familiar, like the use of power. Like a lot of people are using power meters as their target for interval training on the bike. And I think, that is awesome, but I also think we've come to this point where at some point we start to worship it. And it's like, just hitting a power number in your training does not guarantee you a good performance. And so I'm trying to help these kids, like I want them to develop these mental strategies in training that when they're dealing with these same sensations in racing, they have the mental strategies to deal with it. So again, it's not chasing a number on a power meter, but it's almost like, thinking about an action that makes them fast and efficient, or thinking about, focusing on a feeling or that mantra, so it's more that kind of thing that, again, like using the training, it's a dress rehearsal. It's not just getting through the time and ticking off the box. Like, let's maximize that.
Yep, understood. So what about for yourself? Like, do you have moments where you get demotivated or, get overwhelmed? So how do you deal with those situations?
Yeah, it's true. Totally do. Like I think, we're human, right? So we're all going to have like days where we're totally in it and, we have that purpose and that intention, and days where we're like, oh, don't feel like doing this, But it's funny to me, like, I think I just had one of those days. And it's like, if I can just kind of get myself like, okay, get dressed, get the shoes on, put the leg over the bike, 10 minutes in, I'm just so happy I've done it. And it's like, everything's good. And I think for the busy professional, like that's the hardest thing sometimes, like they're tired, life is busy, they're holding all these ways, but I think if you can just put the shoes on and get out the door, 10 minutes later, you're good to go. And I think another thing I really try to emphasize with like the busy professionals that I work with is, like just start writing. Like don't even put a ton of pressure on yourself if you have like a workout plan for that day. Just start writing, just see how you feel. And I think it's like to take that pressure away and just say, okay, all I have to do is write 10 minutes and then just see where it takes you.
Yep.
Because I think that's the hardest thing sometimes. Again, when you feel spread thin and you're tired, it's just simply getting out the door.
Okay. And now, what about goal setting? So obviously you're clearly someone who's been very successful. So what's the goal setting process you work through? So what's your particular methodology?
I think it's super important. And I know like people that have studied this or maybe heard this with the kids, but like they can't all be result focused, right? Like there have to be like we call process and performance and then outcome. And I think like the process is kind of like could be training, like let's have some good goals. And so, maybe it's that busy professional I'm working with and they're just having a hard time just with consistency. And it's like, okay, let's try to hit 3 days this week, like keep it like so manageable and so achievable and then just gradually build on that. But I think like having those process goals, and again, that's within, an example could be within training and however that looks for the individual. But again, if it's somebody struggling with just consistency, like trying to hit like at least 3 days in a week or really trying to bring good intention to a workout, like mentally connecting the dots, like why they're doing it. And then, kind of those performance goals. So if you're in a race situation where, you're going to like try to work on your technical skills on the descent of a race, like try to be like every lap smoother than the last. And I think when you start like having these process and these performance goals, then the result goals just, they're going to start happening. I also think it's super important. I feel like this is a big reason why, like, I had such a positive experience in my career and I still love riding my bike is like, I really felt super like content and satisfied. If I did a race and I knew like I left everything out there, like anytime little doubt or fear came into my head, I like got rid of it. I ran towards it, not away from it. And I really sincerely felt like I left everything out on the road. I was fine with whatever results came. Like, and I think for me, that's super important and it kept it super healthy because, a lot of times in events and races, there's a lot of things that aren't in our control. And I think it's just being really in tune with like what you did and evaluating how you rode it or ran it. And just, if you really did everything you could do, like being happy with that regardless of the results.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point because we live in a very results-oriented society, don't we? So if you're not hitting whatever society says is the number or whatever it is, or on the bike, the power kind of like ratio, then you're not performing. So it can be quite disheartening. So like, I think your advice in using more process, kind of like goals is like in performance kind of goals is quite a good thing. Kind of like makes the goal setting process a lot more achievable.
Yep. If you don't have all your eggs, like it's just whether I get first, like that can be so negative and just demoralizing.
Yep, no, definitely. So you mentioned before that you really haven't had to adjust your training too much, like you've pretty much followed the same path. But have you noticed you've needed to adapt your training at all because of age? certain things coming up, or, niggles or anything along that. So, you've made some adaptations on your training, or you're just exactly 100% the same as you were before?
Well, I mean, I would say I probably would, but just by virtue of like foraying into business, where I'm not a professional athlete anymore, like there's other things I need to take into consideration with my time. So in a way, it's just like, it's great. It all works out because it's like, I don't have the time to train as much as I used to, and I probably couldn't tolerate it. And quite honestly, mentally, it would be boring for me.
Yeah.
Like I love, so to me now it's all about being smarter in how I train and making it count and not doing hours and hours and hours, which I don't need anyway. But yeah, so I probably just by virtue of starting to work, I've pulled back on the total volume, but I would say generally like the structure part is very similar.
Okay. So the key is intensity. So for now, like your optimization is intensity as opposed to volume. That's what your real focus is on now.
I would say I think the key is a good mix of things.
Yeah.
Like it's never just all or nothing. So interesting. So, I do I run this lab, like it's sports med. We call it the endurance lab. So it's physiology and testing and bike fit and data analysis. And so one of the tests I do is it's a relatively new protocol. It's a metabolic efficiency test. And it's understanding, like kind of back to our conversation about using like the right fuels for the right intensity. You want to see, like, is your body really using the type of fuel that should be for the right intensity? So basically, this is a very low intensity test, and it was popularized by the ultra runners who, are looking for like that fat metabolism.
Yeah.
But it's low intensity test. So let's say we start somebody at 2 miles per hour on the treadmill, and we're just looking at their oxygen and CO2 exchange to understand their substrate utilization. So their fats to carbohydrates. And, these people will come in that have prescribed to like this HIIT training. You know what that is? Like there's all these in the US, there's like Orange Theory, these different like gyms, and it's all about high intensity work. Like that's all they do is high intensity work. And so they're kind of like, gosh, kind of scratching their head, like my body is like plateaued. And I'm like, well, what do you do? Well, I do this HIIT training like 6 days a week. So we put them on the treadmill, and right like at 2 miles per hour, they're using almost 100% carbohydrate. And so it's like, their body has downregulated the ability to use fats because they never do long endurance.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, and then the people that do long endurance all the time, well, they've downregulated the ability to do the high intensity work. So it's keeping that mix, and every workout has like several like benefits. It's not just one benefit, like the high intensity, like the 10 to 30 second efforts, it's force development, it's maintaining that quick twitch muscle, it's mechanics, all those sorts of things. But in my opinion, the real trick with training is how like workouts are sequenced through the week and maintaining that mix of things.
Okay. So that's the real secret in longevity then, is to kind of like mix it up, keep that variety. So I guess that keeps your body kind of like always thinking, doesn't it? Like it never gets comfortable on one kind of direction. It's always been changed. So it forces it to adapt. So that kind of keeps it kind of like improving as well. So if you keep on doing the same thing, like as you said, if you do 6 HIIT sessions, well, you're going to hit a plateau eventually because you can't keep on doing any more. So you got to find some other way to make it stimulate your body, don't you?
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've found that I think is super valuable, which I've learned, is the goal with training is you're trying to achieve these adaptations while at the same time minimizing the stress on the autonomic nervous and the endocrine system. And it's a balance. And so like we can do long endurance is an amazing intensity, like because so many mechanisms and systems are developed when we're doing long intensity. And then of course, like depending on our goal, yeah, we want to do some threshold type work to push our threshold out. and then again, as I said, like that, those shorter efforts for like quick twitch and force development, that sort of thing. But I think like keep that in mind, like long endurance is just so beneficial, and it's not stressful on our systems. But again, I can't do all of that because then the other part's gonna kind of depress down. But I think that's something super important to keep in mind with training is like you're trying to achieve these adaptations while mitigating the stress on the autonomic nervous and the endocrine system. And that's just such a silent thing. And so like once you get past like that threshold mark of intensity, that's where like the stress becomes exponential on those systems. So it's just, again, being super, like strategic in how you're developing your training.
Yep. Okay, cool. So, well, let's change direction a little bit. What's your definition of wellness?
Gosh, I just think, it's overused, but just holistic. And I think wellness for me is just, it's as much your mind as your body. And for me, I think what I do now, like just continuing to be physically active, is as much my mental health as physical. And I think I've kind of come to realize like contentment. I don't take contentment for granted. And I think a lot of people are like always chasing something in life, and I think wellness for me is like just being content. And I think when I have this nice balance in my life, like that includes the physical outlet, but also like mentally stimulated, like I feel like content. And for me, that I think would be a definition of wellness.
Okay. So to elaborate a little bit on that, do you have free or strategies or tips you would give to other people to kind of, like slow down the aging process?
I don't know about that, but I think it is about just like, I hate to call them habits. So I think it's, in a way, and I think that I say this to the athletes I train, it's like having good habits, like I think depending on your work situation and family situation, I think stress is like, we can't see stress, but it certainly manifests itself. And I think, like, again, having this outlet that you own, like that's the other thing I love about continuing to have like this athletic outlet. It's I own it,
Yeah.
And it's my time. Like I said, just, again, it's as much metaphysical as physical for me. And it's that time that it's mine, and I can get out and run the trails or ride and, collect my thoughts. And I think, it totally releases stress. So I think it's important that, people find that thing that makes them joyous on a daily basis. It's not about necessarily grinding to do a bucket list event. I think it's that thing that you have in your daily life that you look forward to doing. And it just makes you feel better. So, whatever that physical thing is. And I think just, having like, again, back to the habits of like, so simple, like good nutrition, just taking time to, eat well, like take time to prepare. And I know some people aren't necessarily in a position where, they have the time to shop and prepare. Because I think to eat well really takes time.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, for myself, when I'm super busy, it's like, oh, last thing I want to do is make something, like grab the jar of peanut butter, like it's like, I don't want to prepare, but I think, like just having that time, and you can make it kind of like meditative and just like almost like therapy to make a good dinner. And then just, sleep is so darn important. And just that's the time we're really repairing and restoring.
Yep. No, agreed. Like it's a kind of like a balanced approach. And unlike you, like sometimes I'm a big cereal guy. So when I can't be bothered making anything, I get out the rolled oats and put in some protein powder. And so I'm a little bit lazy as well. So
yeah, I hear you.
So what's your definition of ageless living?
I guess for me, it's just not really thinking about it. Like, I don't really think about age, and like sometimes I honestly forget. I seriously do, like my age. Like when people ask me, and I'm not really into answering that question anyway, like what's your age? But honestly, for me, I don't think about it. I really don't. Like I'm living my life. I'm not thinking about, I'm this old, so I should be doing this, or, you know, I'm never letting that number dictate what I do or who I am.
No, brilliant. I fully agree with you there. So, what would you say to all these young guys? Because we're in our 50s now. So, so we have these people approaching 40 or just reach 40 who are kind of like viewing this all negatively or with some kind of anxiety. You know, what would you say to these guys?
I mean, I guess like for me, I mean, I think we get better. Like, and I think we have this wisdom and this experience and this perspective that just helps us, like, I don't know, maybe like we feel more grounded and less stressed. And I don't know, I wouldn't worry about it. Like life goes on.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, forget about it. Don't worry. Age doesn't mean anything. So,
Yeah.
so do you have a life motto?
You know, I don't know if I do, but it's funny. I was thinking about these questions, and one thing for me, I think like, um, in a small span of life, I lost people that were like three people that were super important to me, and I think that's made me realize like life is super fragile, and you know we're never going to understand like the mysteries of life, but what it's really made me do is make the most of every single day. Like, and when I wake up in the morning, I think to myself, okay, I'm just gonna like, you know, I want to learn, I want to improve, and I want to make a difference. And so those, you know, like literally every single morning when I wake up, and when I feel like I have like this purpose to make a difference, it makes my life feel so much better and so much more fulfilling.
No, awesome. No, very good. So, what about three life lessons you've learned in life that you think would be of value to other people?
So I think like I feel like these lessons are going to sound really trite, but I really do live by them. Like one thing for sure, I've never had an issue with what people think about me. Like that's never influenced decision making. Like I've kind of taken this unorthodox path in life, and it's not for the sake of bucking society, but it's just, I was listening to what was important for me. And I think it's, you know, I talk with the kids I coach about like finding your voice. And I think a lot of adults need to find their voice, you know, and I think there's a lot of noise always circulating around us and opinion, and it's super hard just to take time just to, you know, be quiet and listen to yourself. And like for me, kind of a big part of that is I've always been spiritual and not I've been rather private about it, but it's always been an important part of my life. And it's just that time I take every day, you know, to just be quiet and kind of listen. So I think that's really important. Just, you know, don't let what others think about you just influence or dictate what you do or who you are. I also think like I just have learned not to take myself too seriously. And again, I think it's just having this perspective of like life is short, you know, don't get mucked down in the minutia. Kind of just like don't take it too seriously, you know, like things will work out. And then the other one that I feel like has helped me a ton is just like I feel like when my motives and my decision making are good and pure, like things work out. You know, like I know sometimes we have like struggles with decisions, but I always think about that, like just being super sincere in my decision making. And then I feel like things really unfold the right way.
Awesome. So to finish up, I promise you, this is the last question. So what is your definition of living your best life, or what I call a legend life?
Yeah, I think like I said, I just feel like making the most of every day, you know, like and seizing opportunity and just like being open and willing to keep changing and know that like you can keep learning, like every single day you can continue to learn and improve. Like I think that makes life feel really good.
Awesome. Well, Julie, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot of value out of this. So for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about yourself and then also your training, how can they find you online?
I have a website, julieyoungtraining.com.
Okay. So Instagram, your handle on Instagram?
Julie.young training, I think.
Julie
Something
Young
like
Training.
there may be a dot there. There may be Julie.young training.
Okay, well, I'll give them all the details so they can make sure they can find you. So,
Thank you.
well, thanks again. It's been wonderful.
Thanks, Damien. It's nice to meet you.